Picture this. You're standing in line, gripping an overpriced coffee, just kind of scrolling on your phone while you wait to board a budget flight to Liverpool.
Oh, yeah, the classic early morning airport shuffle.
Exactly. It
Ugh.
feels incredibly mundane, right?
Yeah.
Just standard 21st century travel. But what you probably don't realize as you're shuffling toward that gate is that the concrete beneath your feet was originally poured to launch, like, highly restricted Cold War military fighter jets.
Which is just a wild thing to think about when you're just trying to find your boarding pass.
Right. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are exploring the wild metamorphosis of Solidarity Szczecin-Goleniów Airport. You might actually know it by its IATA code, SZZ.
Yeah, and for the roughly, 1.6 million people living within its catchment area, meaning the radius in northwestern Poland where people are actually willing to drive to use it, it's probably just viewed as a standard place to catch a flight.
Yeah, you book your ticket, grab your bag, board your plane.
Yeah.
But beneath that routine civilian facade is this absolute masterclass in how physical infrastructure adapts to massive historical change.
It really is a profound transformation. I mean, I want you to imagine, just for a second, standing on a stretch of tarmac that has completely shifted its fundamental identity over the course of 70 years.
Because that does not happen overnight.
No, not at all. Going from a secretive, closed-off military installation to a bustling, modern European civilian gateway is rarely a seamless process. It's really a story of forcing a square peg into a round hole until eventually, the hole changes shape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand what this airport is today, we have to look at why it was built in the first place.
And spoiler alert, it was not built to whisk tourists away on cheap holidays.
Definitely not. Construction began between 1953 and 1956. We are talking about the absolute height of Cold War paranoia here.
Right in the thick of it.
Yeah. It's located 45 kilometers northeast of the city of Szczecin, near the town of Goleniów, right in this little village called Gliwice. And when the military built this site, it was just a standard utilitarian airfield.
Right, an 1,800-meter by 45-meter runway, some basic hangars, a functional air traffic control tower, and really not much else.
Right, and it just sat there serving the military for about a decade. But then, in 1967, this massive shift occurs.
The relocation.
Yeah, the nearby civilian airport, which was operating out of Dobie, is entirely relocated to this military site in Gliwice.
Okay.
And they suddenly rename it Port Lotnicy Szczecin-Goleniów.
Which was probably a huge shock to the system.
Right. I mean, to me, this feels a bit like moving out of a cramped starter apartment, which I guess was Adobe, and hauling all your furniture into a stark, cold military barracks.
That's a great way to look at it.
Oh, wait, hold on. You can't just, slap a civilian airport sign on a Cold War military base and expect it to magically work for regular everyday travelers.
No, you really can't.
Because there's no baggage claim, there's no cafes, no passenger flow.
Exactly. And the initial transition is usually quite jarring for those early civilian users because the infrastructure of a 1950s military airbase is incredibly rigid.
Right. It's all about function.
Yeah, it's built strictly for combat readiness, aircraft maintenance, and high-level security. It's intentionally designed to keep unauthorized people out.
Which is the exact opposite of a commercial airport.
Right. Civilian airports are designed to invite thousands of unauthorized people in, process them efficiently, and, keep them comfortable. So you have this massive clash of architectural purpose.
So how did it survive that clash?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the military's requirement for a massive footprint accidentally provided the exact spatial canvas needed for future civilian aviation growth.
Okay, but how so? Because spatial canvas sounds great, but practically they were still sitting in a Spartan barracks.
Right, but think about the physics of aviation. Military jets, especially those heavily loaded Soviet-era fighters or bombers, they need long, wide, heavily reinforced concrete runways.
Oh, sure. And plenty of space around them.
Exactly. They need massive clear zones around the airfield for safety and operational security. Now, try finding that much flat, unobstructed land near a major city to build a civilian airport from scratch today.
Oh, it's an absolute logistical and bureaucratic nightmare. Just look at the protests, the red tape for building any new runway in Europe right now.
Exactly. So while the immediate transition in 1967 absolutely felt like moving into a barracks with zero amenities, the sheer scale of the military infrastructure gave the civilian operators this massive, ready-made foundation.
Ah, so they didn't have to fight for the land. They already had the hardest part built.
Right, they just had to figure out how to make it livable for the modern traveler.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because they didn't just accept those Spartan conditions. The history here looks like a relentless, decades-long home renovation.
And we all know the stress of home renovations.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But imagine doing one where you are living in the house while simultaneously tearing down the walls. Because they had to keep the airport operational the entire time.
That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. So let's look at the timeline. Between 1976 and 1977, they extend the runway to 2,500 meters made of asphalt, and they build a new passenger terminal.
Which was a big step up.
Huge. Then we jump to the late 90s. In 1998, they're out there improving the runway and the main apron. A year later, in 1999, they upgrade the electricity, the runway lighting, and the approach lighting.
Just constantly chipping away at it.
Right. And then the 21st century hits, and it's just a total boom. A brand new passenger terminal opens in 2001, which they end up expanding again by April 2006.
Yeah, the growth really accelerated there.
And while that's happening, they are building a brand new state-of-the-art air traffic control tower between 2004 and the end of 2005. It's just nonstop construction. So what is driving this frantic need to upgrade every single wire, light bulb, and stretch of asphalt?
Well, it mostly comes down to catching up with the strict demands of modern international commercial aviation. An 1,800-meter runway is fine for a 1950s fighter jet, right?
Sure.
But a fully loaded commercial Boeing 737 or an Airbus A320 requires much more stopping distance, especially in bad weather. So extending the runway to 2,500 meters in the 70s was just a baseline requirement for survival.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about all the lighting and the electrical grid stuff in the late 90s?
That is all about reliability and volume. I mean, commercial airlines operate on razor-thin margins. They cannot afford to divert flights because an airport's lighting system isn't robust enough to handle, heavy Polish fog.
Oh, wow. Yeah, diverted flights cost a fortune.
Exactly. By completely rewiring the airport's nervous system, they were guaranteeing to international airlines that Chassin-Goleniuk could safely land a commercial jet in practically any weather condition at any time of day.
That is a massive selling point for an airline. And right as that major wave of physical modernization wraps up, there's this very specific detail that caught my eye.
Oh, about the name change.
Yeah. In April 2006, right as that major terminal expansion concludes, they officially renamed the airport after the Solidarność, or Solidarity Trade Union. So why 2006? It seems like a very deliberate moment to completely rebrand the facility.
Oh, it was incredibly deliberate. If we connect this to the bigger picture, renaming the airport wasn't just a standard corporate branding exercise where, a company slaps a new logo on a building.
Right, it meant something more.
You have to look at what the airport was shedding. For decades, its physical bones, its very DNA, were rooted in a Soviet-era Cold War military design.
Yeah, that stark military history.
Right. All of that construction, you just walk through the extended runways, the all-weather lighting, the modern glass terminals, the new tower that was the physical transformation.
Yeah.
But by April 2006, the airport had finally physically outgrown its military origins entirely.
It actually looked and functioned like a seamless modern European hub.
Exactly. So renaming it after the Solidarity Trade Union, which, based on the source material, was the grassroots movement so fiercely instrumental in dismantling communist rule and bringing democracy to Poland. That was the psychological transformation.
Ah, shedding the old identity.
Yes. It was the final triumphant step in shedding its Cold War skin. It was a way of declaring a proudly modern, democratic Polish identity on the international stage.
I really love that. The physical bones change first, and then the psychological identity follows to match the new reality.
It's a very common pattern in recovering infrastructure.
And with that new, modernized terminal and a proud, historically significant name, the airport completely opens itself up to the world. And the result is this absolute roller coaster of passenger and cargo traffic.
Oh, the numbers are wild.
The numbers here are a wild ride. Let's look at who is actually flying in and out of there today. We have Elatat Polish Airlines flying a domestic route to Warsaw Chopin.
The standard hub connection.
Right. Then we have Ryanair flying internationally to Liverpool and London Stansted with some seasonal flights to Dublin and Krakow. We have Wizz Air flying to Oslo.
And actually, let me jump in real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Since today is March 11th, 2026, we should probably mention to anyone listening right now that later this very month, on March 30, Wizz Air is beginning a brand new route to Bergen.
Oh, right. Bergen, Norway. That's a great catch.
Yeah, that route expansion is a really solid indicator of the airport's current health and its integration into the broader Scandinavian travel market.
Exactly. But let's look at the actual traffic because the real story is hidden in these numbers. In 2007, they handled about 231,000 passengers.
Pretty modest.
Yeah, but over the next decade, as those budget airlines ramp up, that climbs to a massive peak of nearly 600,000 passengers in 2018.
Huge growth.
But then, obviously, the 2020 collapse happens. Global travel freezes. Passengers plummet by almost 68%, dropping all the way down to about 184,000.
Which was brutal for regional airports everywhere.
But then they experienced this massive bounce back, a 130% increase in 2022 to nearly 420,000 passengers, and then stabilized at about 477,000 in 2023.
Which is a very healthy recovery.
It is. Now, I can completely understand the passenger cliff drop in 2020 and the subsequent recovery. That tracks perfectly with global events. But wait, hold on. I'm looking at these freight numbers and my brain is basically short-circuiting.
Yeah, the cargo data is pretty jarring.
They are completely broken. Human travel bounces back, but cargo was at over 1,235 tons in 2007. By 2020, it evaporated to 4.5 tons.
4 ton.
Basically nothing.
You could fit that in a few moving vans. And by 2023, it has barely recovered to 90 tons. If the airport is doing so well with humans, what is driving this massive disconnect? Why are the passengers coming back in droves, but the cargo business basically vanished into thin air? It is a stark contrast. I mean, when you see a drop from over 1,200 tons down to literally 4 tons, it feels like a typo in the data.
Seriously, I had to double check it.
But it's actually a perfect reflection of the underlying economics of modern aviation. To understand that missing cargo, you have to look at the operational models of the specific airlines driving the passenger growth.
Okay, so Ryanair and Wizz Air.
Exactly. The airlines you just mentioned are ultra-low-cost carriers. They are the absolute lifeblood of regional airports like Szczecin-Goleniów.
Right.
But their entire business model is predicated on moving human beings as quickly, cheaply, and efficiently as possible.
Right, the classic budget model.
Yeah. They aim for 25-minute turnaround times on the tarmac. The plane lands, passengers disembark, the cabin is quickly swept, new passengers board, and the plane is back in the sky. Because an airplane only makes money when it is in the air.
Right, time on the ground is just burning cash.
Precisely. Now, you cannot achieve a 25-minute turnaround time if you are loading and unloading heavy, awkwardly shaped industrial cargo pallets in the hold.
Oh, of course not. They are primarily loading, what, passenger backpacks and small roller suitcases.
Right. So while the passenger numbers soar because everyday people are taking advantage of cheap, accessible flights to Liverpool or Oslo, traditional heavy cargo operations simply don't fit that high-speed, low-cost model.
Wow, so the airport literally had to pick a lane.
Yeah, as the airport leaned harder into the budget airline model to survive and grow its passenger base, it naturally squeezed out the heavy freight. Regional airports often find their primary survival mechanism in these budget airlines.
Meaning they adapt to become incredibly efficient in moving humans.
Exactly. While the heavy industrial freight gets shifted to major international logistics hubs or simply moves to ground transportation networks.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. They aren't failing at cargo. They're actively optimizing for humans instead of pallets. But getting those hundreds of thousands of humans into the air brings up another massive logistical hurdle. Because all those passengers landing in Gleis still have a major geographic problem. They are 45 kilometers away from the actual city of Szczecin.
That's a significant distance.
Right. Now, it's noted that you can get there via the S3 and A6 highways, and there are standard coaches available. But what does this actually mean for the traveler? I like to think of this as the last mile problem of aviation.
That's a good term for it.
It's really about the psychology of the commuter. You know, you can fly all the way across Europe from London to Poland in 2 hours. You're watching a movie, having a drink. It feels like magic.
The miracle of flight.
Yeah. But if you land, grab your bag, and find out you are stuck in a field 45 kilometers from your destination, relying on a bus that might get stuck in an hour of unpredictable highway traffic, that completely ruins the magic.
Oh, entirely. The anxiety of the highway commute changes your whole perception of the journey.
But then, in July 2013, a massive game changer happens. They opened a rail spur, and it's just 4 kilometers of track.
Very small addition.
Just this tiny little 4-kilometer spur that directly linked the airport to the mainline railway running between Szczecin and Kutabriggs. Suddenly, you have up to 8 trains a day covering the route from the Szczecin main railway station to the airport in approximately 50 minutes.
And it connects out to Golenio, Gryfice, and Kutabriggs, too.
Right. But I have to ask, how can a tiny 4-kilometer piece of rail track fundamentally change the viability of an entire airport? I mean, it seems so minor compared to building a giant glass terminal.
It might seem minor in distance, but it changes everything because physical infrastructure is ultimately only as good as its connections.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, this raises an important question about urban planning and aviation history. Think about how many regional airports have failed simply because they remained isolated islands.
Yeah, there's so many of them.
Right. You can build the most beautiful modern glass terminal in the world, and you can pave a massive, flawless 2,500-meter runway. But if people cannot seamlessly and predictably integrate that airport into their daily commute, it will struggle to survive.
Because it's just too much of a hassle.
Exactly. That 4-kilometer rail spur did something incredibly powerful. It bridged the gap between the isolated, remote nature of a former military base and the dynamic, interconnected reality of a modern city network.
Because trains don't sit in highway traffic.
Exactly. The train provides predictability. If a traveler knows the train takes exactly 50 minutes, they can plan their entire journey with zero anxiety about a crash on the A6 highway making them miss their flight.
That peace of mind is huge.
It really is. By linking the airport directly to the main line, that tiny piece of track made the airport highly accessible, not just to the city center of Szczecin, but to the entire catchment area of 1.6 million residents you mentioned at the start.
It connects directly to the broader civic bloodstream.
Yes. It turns a remote, isolated runway in a village into a true, reliable civic utility.
Is the ultimate connector. Man, we've really covered some incredible ground today. Just looking back at the journey we've unpacked. You start in the early 50s with a highly restricted, secretive Cold War military runway.
A place strictly designed for combat readiness.
Yeah, heavily guarded, entirely closed off from the public, and over decades of relentless renovation while the facility was still operating, you see it slowly adapt. It gets longer runways, modern lighting, and glass terminals.
It completely reinvents itself.
It really does. It shifts its psychological identity by proudly taking on the Solidarity name in 2006. It completely reinvents its business model to cater to the high-speed demands of budget airlines, moving hundreds of thousands of everyday people instead of military hardware or heavy cargo.
And then solving that last mile.
It's exactly. Finally, through brilliant infrastructure additions like that 4-kilometer rail spur, it physically ties itself to the people it serves. It transforms into a bustling, democratic hub, a place that launches everyday travelers to Oslo, to Liverpool, and, as we noted, very soon, to Bergen.
It's just a fantastic story.
It is an absolute masterclass in how cities can reclaim, repurpose, and completely rewrite their own history.
It truly is. It's a testament to adaptability. And, as we wrap up our analysis of SCZ, there is one final lingering detail from the historical categorization of Polish airports that I want you to think about.
Oh, what's that?
Well, when you look at the broader map of Poland, there are several other defunct military airports places with names like Kluczewo and Legnica. They were built in the same era for the exact same military purposes.
Oh, wow. What happened to them?
Today, those places are categorized merely as ghosts. They are defunct, abandoned. Their runways are cracking, slowly being reclaimed by weeds and forests.
That's haunting.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, what are the invisible factors that decide why one military airship successfully transforms into a thriving, modern civilian gateway like Solidarity Szczecin-Golenio, while others simply fade back into the earth, lost entirely to history?
Was it the location? Was it the civic will to invest in those renovations? Or was it simply the foresight to build those 4 kilometers of track? That is a fascinating question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you are rushing through an airport to catch a flight, annoyed by the lines or the price of coffee, take a moment to look at the concrete beneath your feet. Think about what that land used to be, and keep questioning the history of the ground you're standing on. We'll see you next time.